Imagine returning home to your peaceful ranch, expecting the quiet rhythm of open land, the sound of wind moving through the grass, and the familiar comfort of your own property, only to discover that everything has changed in your absence. What once felt like a sanctuary has become a scene of confusion, conflict, and disbelief, and at the center of it all stands an HOA that had absolutely no right to touch your ranch. This is the story of how an HOA built an illegal warehouse on my property and tore down my barn without warning, without permission, and without the slightest respect for boundaries. It is a story of shock, determination, and the fight to reclaim what was mine. I had left the ranch for a short trip, expecting everything to be exactly how I left it. My barn was old but strong, filled with memories, tools, equipment, and pieces of my life collected over the years. It was the heart of the property, the place where every project started and every long day ended. The HOA had never been part of my life because my ranch was outside their boundaries, and I had made sure of that when I bought the place. I wanted independence, freedom, and space. They had no authority over my land, no jurisdiction, and no business interfering with anything on my property. But when I drove up the long dirt road, something felt wrong. The usual open view was blocked by a giant metal structure where it absolutely should not have been a warehouse. A full-scale warehouse planted right in the middle of my land. Its shiny aluminum walls reflected the sunlight like it was proud of being there, even though it had no right to exist. Behind it was an empty space where my barn used to stand, and the reality hit me like a punch. The barn was gone, completely gone, not damaged, not altered, not remodeled, but erased from the ground like it never existed. The earth was disturbed, the foundation ripped up, and pieces of broken wood lay scattered like forgotten remains. The structure that had stood for decades was wiped out without my consent and without any legal justification. My first thought was that someone made a mistake, maybe a construction company mixed up addresses, maybe a contractor failed to read a map. But when I asked around, the neighbors told me the unbelievable truth. The HOA, the same HOA I never belonged to, the same HOA that had no authority over ranch property, had decided that the land was within what they called a community expansion zone. They took it upon themselves to claim the area and start building a storage warehouse for their maintenance equipment, and without hesitation, they bulldozed my barn to make space for it. The level of arrogance was astonishing. They acted as if the land was theirs, as if my barn was an inconvenience, as if the life and history stored inside it had no value. It was not just property damage, it was a violation of trust boundaries and basic rights. They assumed I would not be home. They assumed I would not fight. They assumed wrong. I immediately contacted county officials and every agency that could possibly have something to say about land rights, zoning laws, and illegal construction. The more information I gathered, the clearer it became. The HOA had no permits, no legal standing, and no documentation that allowed them to touch my land. They did everything in secret, rushing the construction to finish before anyone could object. They believed that once the warehouse was built, no one would force them to remove it. But they underestimated how far I was willing to go. I documented every inch of the damage, took photos, recorded videos, and filed formal complaints. I demanded that the county send inspectors, and they did. The moment the officials arrived, they saw what I saw: an unapproved structure built on privately owned land in a demolished barn that was taken down without permission. The HOA tried to defend themselves, claiming they thought the area was community property. They blamed a mapping error. They blamed a contractor. They blamed anything except their own decisions. But documents never lie, and the county records clearly showed that the ranch land was mine and had never once been part of the HOA boundaries. Their actions were not just wrong, they were illegal. While the investigation moved forward, I confronted the HOA board. They sat around a long polished table, trying to look professional, but their expressions revealed a mix of nervousness, irritation, and disbelief that I dared challenge. I told them exactly what they had done and what I expected them to fix. The room felt heavy with tension as they realized that every excuse they prepared would fall apart under scrutiny. The county ordered an immediate halt to all construction. The warehouse that stood proudly days earlier was now considered a violation and would have to be removed completely, piece by piece, at the HOA's expense. They also faced fines, legal consequences, and the obligation to compensate me for the destruction of my barn. But what mattered most to me was justice. Seeing them forced to account for their actions reminded me that property rights are not suggestions, they are laws with teeth and consequences. The HOA had crossed a line, and now they had to step back. The removal of the warehouse was loud, messy, and slow, but every sound felt like a restoration of what had been taken. Workers dismantled the metal walls, unbolted the framework, and hauled away the remains until the ground was finally clear. Once the warehouse was gone, the county required the HOA to provide funds for rebuilding my barn to the condition it was in before they destroyed it. I worked with builders to design a structure that honored the old barn but added improvements. I had always wanted. The reconstruction was emotional but also healing, and watching it rise again felt like reclaiming a part of myself. Asterisk, through this entire ordeal, I learned something powerful. You cannot always prevent people from crossing boundaries, but you can always fight to push them back. The HOA had tried to take advantage of silence, distance, and assumed ignorance, but they underestimated the strength of someone willing to stand up for what belongs to them. Asterisk, the barn now stands tall again, with every beam serving as a reminder that rights matter, that ownership is not optional, and that no organization, no matter how confident or entitled, can simply take what is not theirs. My ranch is my home, my sanctuary, and my responsibility, and no one will ever remove anything from it again. Asterisk, this experience changed the way I look at property, the way I look at authority, and the way I look at people who believe they can get away with anything, simply because they think they are in charge. But in the end, they were forced to learn the hard way that land is more than soil. It is history, identity, and the place where every person deserves to feel secure and respected. Asterisk, and as I stand today on the rebuilt foundation, I know this: the H might have torn down my barn, but in doing so, they built something they never intended. They built my determination, my resolve, and my unshakable promise to defend my land no matter what comes next.